Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm so glad that you're here. Today's video is probably going to be a longer video because we are talking about every single book that I have read in 2023, and I have read a lot of books. If at any point you enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. We do a lot of fun things. This year I really want to try and upload more consistently, get ready for more sit-down videos, get ready for more vlogs, get ready for me to share everything I love to do, and everything in between. This video is gonna be long, so I'm gonna try to keep this intro short. If you haven't already, follow me on all my social media. Everything is at Kiana Gabrielle _. Grab a cup of coffee, maybe even grab a pen and paper so that you can keep track of all the books that I've read. Maybe you want to add them to your TBR list, and let's get started with this video. So in the beginning of 2023, I had decided that I was gonna lowball myself and only promise to read 6 books a year. I had gotten interested in reading and started my love for books and all things reading in 2020 when we hit the COVID lockdown and there was literally nothing else to do, so I picked up a book to read. And since then, my love of reading has grown, but I still wanted to lowball myself by reading a book every 2 months. I had upped it to 12 books for 2023, so 1 book per month, and that is actually what I set my Goodreads 2023 challenge to be. I track all my books, every single page that I am reading on Goodreads. I'm gonna have my Goodreads linked in the description box down below. I have read a total of 25 books in 2023, which is kind of insane considering I didn't even think that I could read 6 books in 2023 and I ended up reading 25 books. That is kind of absurd, kind of ridiculous. Some point in the middle of the year, I ended up getting a Kindle, and this has been my best friend, and I literally take it everywhere with me, and it is probably one of the sole reasons that I was able to read 25 books. So just to go through some statistics that Goodreads actually gives you at the end of every year, I have read a total of 8,058 pages. The shortest book that I read was 80 pages, and the longest book I read last year was 480 pages, and my average rating for 2023 was a 4.1. I started the year by reading The Silent Patient. I have seen this book all over TikTok in 2022. Basically follows a psychotherapist named Theo Farber who basically seeks out a job at a very specific mental institution just so he could treat Alicia. And Alicia Berenson's story is crazy. She is completely mute. She does not talk, hence the title of the book, The Silent Patient. I believe she's an artist who had murdered her husband by shooting him like 5 times. Then after she had committed the murder, she just didn't speak at all. She had went to jail, and it was determined that psychologically she just wasn't all there. And the whole story is you're trying to figure out why she shot her husband. I vividly remember the plot twist in this book leaving me so shocked. Like, I had my jaw on the floor. I had given this book 5 stars on Goodreads, and for good reason, because this book was phenomenal. The next book I had actually read on my Kindle app on my iPad, and that is Funny You Should Ask by Elisa Sussman. This book follows a journalist who a couple years ago interviewed her celebrity crush, and they spent this whole whimsical weekend together, and something happened on that weekend that dramatically changed their dynamic and their supposed friendship. And then years down the line, she has to interview him again. I had read this book in February because I wanted something that would fit like the theme of like love and romance in February. That book did not disappoint. In March, I had read a very popular book from Book Talk, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you were on TikTok at all, this book has completely blown up. I could see why people love it. I could see the appeal of it. I personally did not enjoy this book. It takes a lot for me to not even want to finish a book. I did finish it, but it took me a long time to finish it. This took me an entire month to finish. This journalist who works at a magazine goes and interviews Evelyn Hugo, who is this very successful movie star, and she basically recounts the story of how she got famous, and it goes through a bunch of her 7 husbands. Each of her husbands plays a very pivotal role in her life, but also in her career. I think that Taylor Jenkins Reid is a great author. I just didn't like the premise of the book. It didn't hook me in at all, and for that I gave it 4 stars. I particularly just didn't really care for The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Moving on to the month of April, I had decided to read Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. So this is another psychological thriller suspense kind of book. Basically follows this very, very powerful defense attorney, and her name is Sarah Morgan. She is married to her husband Adam, and her husband ends up having an affair with a girl named Kelly Summers at their like summer home. Kelly Summers ends up dead in their summer home, and obviously the first person that would be a suspect is Adam. Sarah, being a very powerful defense attorney, decides to take Adam's case on. You basically follow the story of her trying to prove if her husband actually did kill his mistress or if he is innocent. The next book I read, technically did not read it. I listened to the audio version of it, and for good reason. And it is the book I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. It is probably one of the only books that I highly recommend that you listen to the audio versus actually reading it, just because it is narrated by Jennette McCurdy. It is very interesting how she's able to put you in certain scenarios in her life. Obviously it follows the story of her acting career. Walk, do not run to listen to this book. The sixth book that I read in 2023 was Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton, and this book was also all over TikTok. I think there was even a trending sound from like a line in her book, and it was good. I did enjoy it. I don't love nonfiction books. Like, I'll read them. I'll read self-help books when I feel like it. This one I had read solely because it blew up on TikTok, but I had given it 3 stars because I don't feel like it was very inspirational. I don't feel like it was my cup of tea personally. There were certain lines that did hit a certain way and it made you really think. Overall, the consensus, I didn't love this book, even though I really wanted to. The next book I read last year was Watching You by Lisa Jewell. Lisa Jewell is the author that actually got me into reading. Her book, Then She Was Gone, is my absolute favorite book, and I recommend it to literally everybody. So I wanted to give another book of hers a try. Really wanted to love this book, but overall I did give it 3 stars because something about this book, it was still well written. She's an amazing writer. I was kind of left unsatisfied in this book. This book follows a bunch of different storylines. So the whole point of this book is that they live on, I wanted to say a street, but I believe that they live in like one neighborhood that overall is pretty well off. Basically everyone is just watching everyone. The 8th book that I read last year was Once More with Feeling by Elisa Sussman. So this is her 2nd book. It follows a very like similar theme of like second chance romance. It follows these 2 kind of like former singer-songwriter types. One of them is a male lead, was formerly in a band, and then the main girl was like a solo act singer, and it follows their relationship, how they were once friends and she was dating his former bandmate. The band broke up. She had broken up with her boyfriend, and then they kind of reconnect. It was very easy to read, and what you expect with a romance, there's always a happy ending. Let's talk about The Maid. This book I have actually not seen on TikTok. It is by the exact same author who read The Silent Patient, which is the first book I read last year, and I loved it. This book, on the other hand, I did not love. I wanted to love it. For me, it was just so obvious who did it. The Maidens basically follows, I believe she's a therapist. She has a niece who goes to university. Her niece's friend ends up dead, and it's like this whole string of like murders. They play it out for you to believe that the kind of sketchy professor did it or didn't do it. The reason why I didn't love it was because it had a lot of references to Greek mythology, and I am just not a Greek mythology girly. It's the same reason why I won't read The Song of Achilles. My coworker had actually persuaded me to read this book. I just thought it was so predictable, probably because I had read The Silent Patient and it was kind of easy. If you read this, you probably know who did it in this. These books exist in the same universe, the same characters. Theo Farber pops up into this one, and he is one of the main characters in this one. So they exist in the same universe. Overall, if I had not read The Silent Patient and I had just read The Maidens, I would have been shocked by the ending. But because I was familiar with the author's writing style, kind of how he sets up scenes, it was pretty obvious for me. Probably by the time we meet the niece. You don't have to read it in this order, but I would actually recommend that you read The Maidens first, then The Silent Patient. Here is when I got into a real romance book phase. I had started reading Tessa Bailey books, and I love Tessa Bailey because it's just such a quick read. It's a little bit spicy, if you're into that, I had read Secretly Yours. Secretly Yours kind of follows a second chance romance kind of situation. Follows a girl who had like a one night kind of like makeout session with her high school crush. He actually moves away, becomes a professor, I believe. She still lives in her small town. She gets hired to do some gardening work at their vineyard. She secretly writes a letter to him. Then to follow up Secretly Yours, I had read Unfortunately Yours. And because this book is the sequel to Secretly Yours, they coexist in the same universe, but you could very much read them as standalone books. Secretly Yours follows the main character from the first book, his sister, and her romance, one night stand to enemies to lovers. And if you love a good enemies to lovers trope, this one is for you. The next book I read was Perfect Sun by Frida McFadden. Around this time is when I got Kindle Unlimited, and Kindle Unlimited has like a list of authors that you could borrow books from, and Frida McFadden is on this list. If you were on Book Talk, you know you love Frida McFadden because her books make you feel something crazy. She gets you hooked right on like the first page of the first chapter. There's a funny story about how I started reading The Perfect Sun. I had actually wanted to read The Inmate by Frida McFadden, and I had both books side by side on my Kindle, but I had accidentally read The Perfect Sun. And as I was reading the book, I was like, this doesn't make sense for how it's set up to be The Inmate. Come to find out that I was reading The Perfect Sun. Oh my goodness. I am so glad that I read The Perfect Sun because it was insane. So it follows the story of this woman who has a son and a daughter and a husband. The son is made out to be like the perfect son, caring, loving, so sweet to everyone, but there's something just like a little bit wrong with him. Then he has a crush on this girl and she ends up going missing, and the mother automatically thinks that her son had something to do with it. And so you go through the whole story and you honestly start believing that it was the son played a role in this girl's disappearance. I had not seen the ending coming. Not a lot of people talk about Perfect Son, and I think it deserves so much more hype. Let's talk about Colleen Hoover. You either love her books or you hate her books. I thought that I was a Colleen Hoover book hater because I had read It Starts With Us and It Ends With Us. I just felt that it was so kiddish. It was just so poorly written. I adored it for what it was, to get me like reading really fast. Like if I read those books now, I'd be like, what is this? My cousin sent me a copy of Verity, and I was really hesitant to read Verity. I had had this on my Kindle for months before I had decided to read it. Oh my god, this book made me feel so on edge, and it was psychologically messing with me. I just couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. It was probably the best Colleen Hoover book I have ever read. It had me second guessing characters and their motives. It had everything that you would love about a psychological thriller, but in a really easily digestible book. Sometimes psychological thrillers will make you think too much and you can't really appreciate the whole storyline until the very end. This one makes you appreciate the writing while you're going through it. Fair warning, it will kind of mess you up a little bit. It will leave your jaw on the floor. Let's get into The Inmate. This book was the book I was initially supposed to read before The Perfect Son. The Inmate follows the story of this girl who, I believe she's a nurse practitioner, and she gets a job at her local jail. And she happens to have a son from her ex-boyfriend from, I believe, high school, who was convicted of, I want to say, murder. And it follows the story of her encountering him again in prison where she now works, and it kind of goes through the story. There's also like a second chance romance that I didn't expect. There is a pretty big plot twist, like a lot of Frida McFadden books. I wanted to love it as much as Book Talk loved it, but I just didn't. I think it was a good book, but I think that it got overhyped by Book Talk. I think if I didn't hear about it from Book Talk first, I would have enjoyed it more. The next two books, we know her, we love her. They are the Housemaid series. I had read The Housemaid and The Housemaid's Secret back to back. I love The Housemaid. I think it had the craziest plot twist at the end. The Housemaid's Secret, on the other hand, I did not love that book. It was just a little tough to follow. I think that the story was just a little bit all over the place in The Housemaid's Secret versus The Housemaid. I think The Housemaid perfectly set it up to where you think it's one thing, but it's actually completely different. Whereas The Housemaid's Secret, you kind of saw it coming, but then it was also really all over the place. Thoroughly enjoyed The Housemaid. Didn't love The Housemaid's Secret, but I will be reading the next book in the series, which comes out in, I believe, June. Now, a lot of these books, I will have to say, you can definitely find the book version and you would be perfectly satisfied reading off Kindle. This next book, I really believe that you need to read it in a physical book form. Murder in the Family. This book is kind of unique, but it's basically exactly what it says. One body, 6 experts. Can you solve the case before they do? It follows the story of Luke Ryder, who is a stepfather of Guy Howard, who is kind of revisiting his stepfather's murder case to figure out who did it. I wouldn't say it is really well written. It is kind of interesting the way that the author decides to present the book. It's kind of like a script-based book. It's basically kind of like a Netflix documentary where they're trying to solve the murder and you're trying to figure out who did it first. So they present the information to both you as the reader and them as the characters and the experts at the same time, and you're trying to solve the murder before they do. A lot of people are either split between they love it or they hate this book. I was kind of indifferent. You've probably never read a similar book to this, and this writing style was very interesting. I think you could do without this book. This next book I actually didn't even plan to read, but my cousin had sent me an ebook of it, and that is the Britney Spears memoir, The Woman in Me. Now, is this book like some fantastically written book? No, but it was very interesting to read about her life. I did overall give it a 3-star rating. Obviously, it's not going to be the best book you've ever read. It just did provide a little bit of insight into her life, her family, her career. If you could listen to the audiobook, I think that would be better. Don't think it's like a must read on everybody's list. The next book I had read, I wanted it to be short just so that I could finish it in time for my vacation, and I decided to read Same Time Next Year by Tessa Bailey. This is actually a new book. I had read it like almost right when it was released. Basically follows this girl who is a bartender and their local hockey team that her half-brother is on. His teammate is from Canada and he would have to move back to Canada because his visa had expired if they don't come up with a solution to keep him there so that he could move up to the NHL. It's a story where she either has to agree to marry him so that he can get a green card, or he would have to go back to Canada. And we all know how the story goes. She ends up marrying him, and it's basically their life navigating whatever kind of situation they come into. It's a super quick read. If you want a really quick easy read, that one's a good one, especially around New Year's. The next book I read was The People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Now this book is very popular. Emily Henry as an author is very popular across all social media channels, and it's basically a romance between 2 best friends who previously went on so many vacations like every single year together, and then they just all of a sudden stop talking. It's a second chance romance. It's a friends to lovers situation. I loved it because it didn't play so heavily on the romance factor. I think it played more so on the friendship factor. Emily Henry does go more into depth of the storyline of the characters, versus Tessa Bailey is very much on the romance part. Both serve different kind of values. The 21st book that I had read in 2023, and it is Window Shop by Tessa Bailey. And Tessa Bailey, you obviously know, she's a romance author. It's quick, it's spicy, it's exactly what you would want for the end of the year. Ex-con who had her dream of being a window dresser. And if you are like me and didn't know what a window dresser was, a window dresser is someone who decorates the front of like window store displays. Basically, this ex-con wanted to be a window dresser. She runs into this guy whose family happens to own the big department store in the town. He sees potential in her and gives her a trial run to be the window dresser for the holiday season. It was giving Hallmark Christmas movie, and I just loved it. Speaking of Hallmark Christmas movies, I had also read Wreck the Halls by Tessa Bailey. This is another one of those second chance romances. This one is a little bit interesting because it goes from like strangers to like acquaintances to strangers again to friends to lovers. 2 main characters, they are the children of their mothers who were in a band together. Is it a band if it's 2 people? They had broken up and there was a big blow up of why they didn't want to work together anymore, and they had actually never met, and they're kind of scheming, plotting how they are going to get their mothers to reunite because everybody wants them to become a band again. It just follows them and their romance, but also them trying to bring their mothers back together. The Christmas Guest. The Christmas Guest by Peter Swanson. It is a thriller for Christmas, and you're probably thinking that's so weird because Christmas supposed to be this happy time, but if you are a lover of thriller, if you also love Christmas, it is like your two favorite things came together and had to be. It is not the greatest book in the whole wide world. I was also a little bit confused about the ending, but it is such a quick read. I believe it's like 100 pages or less. It follows this American who is invited to one of her classmates' manor. There's only 2 chapters in this entire book, and it's really weird. Like, the first chapter has a good chunk of the storyline in it, and then the second chapter is like the wrap up, but it leaves you a little bit confused. The 24th book that I had read was the last Christmas book I had decided to read, which was Resting Scrooge Face by Megan Quinn. This book, so short. It was like 6 chapters and they were like a couple pages each. I wanted something that was so quick, so easy. This book has absolutely no spice in it. It is your classic Hallmark movie where you have a meddling mailman who is trying to play Cupid for the 2 main characters. It's super cute. It's exactly what you would think a Hallmark movie in a book form. And the last book that I had read was Icebreak by Kiana, and this book blew up on TikTok for being so spicy, but it was long. It was so long for God knows why. I have no idea why it was so long. For what it was good. I don't think that I could have read a physical version of this book. I think I'd get exhausted, but I did again read it on the Kindle, and I needed a book for that in-between period between Christmas and New Year's, and that did it for me. Looking back on it, I don't think I would have picked that as like the last book that I read in 2023. It is what it is. And we are finally done. We have went through every single book that I have read in 2023. I am also way ahead of my 2024 reading challenge. Follow me on Goodreads if you want to stay up to date with what I'm reading and what I'm interested in reading. Let me know what you guys are reading, what's on your TBR list, what are your reading goals for 2024. I'm so curious. Again, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, follow me on social media. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!